NATO's defence ministers are meeting in Brussels to discuss a response to the threat from Russia. US Secretary of Defence Pete Hegseth is also there. NATO's two newest members, Sweden and Finland, say they will buy more weapons from the US to help arm Ukraine. This after Pete Hegseth's speech outlining his expectation that NATO countries should buy US weapons for the country. So far, nations have committed some $2 billion to US weapons for Kyiv. The meeting follows a series of aerial incursions into NATO territory and as US President Donald Trump considers supplying long-range Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine. The NATO chief, Mark Rutte, has said that the European Union and the alliance are working together on a so-called drone wall to protect member countries from Russian drone incursions. The proposal was originally put forward by the EU. Here's what he said.
EU and NATO are really working very well together. There is no doubling at all. Ursula von der Leyen, the President of the European Commission, myself, the relevant commissioners, including Kubilius and of course Kaja Kallas and the others, we are all making sure that we make use of the strengths of the two organizations. And NATO is good at the hard stuff, which is the standard setting, the capabilities, the military side. And the EU has the enormous soft power of the internal market, the enormous soft power of making sure the money is there, making sure that the nations in the EU are aligned. And this combination is crucial to work together.
Now, today's meeting of NATO defence ministers comes after a string of airspace violations by Moscow along Europe's eastern flank with Russia. Estonia is one of Ukraine's top supporters, measured by military aid per capita. But in recent months, Tallinn has come under increased pressure from Moscow. DW's Terry Schultz took a closer look.
Russian troops show up on Estonia's border, their faces mostly covered, their weapons on full display.
Judging by the uniform, they were definitely not border guards.
Uniforms that can't be identified, all too reminiscent of those worn by Russian troops dubbed Little Green Men when they gathered at Ukraine's borders in 2014 to participate in Moscow's invasion of Crimea and eastern Ukraine. On Friday, Estonian authorities weren't taking chances.
For us, it was a clear danger situation. The border guards asked the Russian side for information. What's going on there? The Russians said nothing. These are completely normal operations. For us, this was a threat.
Just the latest one. Last month, almost 20 Russian drones invaded Poland's airspace, and 3 fighter jets loitered over Estonia for 12 minutes, a documented incident the Kremlin denied. NATO quickly set up the Eastern Sentry mission for added protection, amid some calls to shoot down Russian jets if they enter Allied airspace again. But Estonian Prime Minister Kristen Michal says he trusts NATO's current rules of engagement.
Each time there's a certain determination and a certain assessment that what is the intention of everybody violating our airspace, what is the direction, weaponry, and so on. So this is for each time to assess by the pilots and everybody in NATO. So I would say that everything is in place and it's working.
Others warn Moscow's provocations will get bolder as it seeks to shift Europe's focus and funds from helping Ukraine.
When will we act to restore respect to our borders and sovereignty and halt this Russian behavior? Essentially, we have to become much more muscular in our rules of engagement and approach, because the Russians, they will never stop unless they're stopped.
Yermolaitis says NATO doesn't have to shoot down planes or drones to send Moscow that message. He suggests, for example, targeting Russian infrastructure or its internet traffic reliant on European cables.
So, with each incident we can tell them, your internet speeds will be 25% less if that happens again. So, we just need to be creative. We have to be imaginative. And there's an ongoing imagination failure when we draw those responses to Russia.
Prime Minister Michal warns the more public focus there is on such incidents, the better it is for the Kremlin.
And they have only one message, for us to talk about it and for our public and everybody to think about, they are in our borders. Let's not talk about Ukraine. Let's talk about our borders. Let's not give anything to Ukraine. We need it here.
Michal vows this won't happen in Estonia, which has already spent 1.4% of its GDP on aid to Kyiv. He says the best way to combat Moscow's attempts to test NATO is to help Ukraine win the war faster.
And we can get more from DW's Terry Schultz now, who filed that report and who's joining us from the NATO headquarters in Brussels. Terry, building up drone defences is something the European Union is working on. Are these separate initiatives, or is this a collaboration between EU nations and NATO?
Well, a little bit of both. The European Union does have its own initiatives to build up counter-drone capabilities. In fact, this term drone wall, which they're very much trying to get away from at the moment, actually came from European Commission Chief Ursula von der Leyen. And the reason they don't want to refer to it as a wall is because it gives the impression there's some kind of way to create an impermeable barrier against drones, and that's just not possible. It's also why it will take both organizations doing everything they can to counter the very powerful capabilities that Russia has built up in its 3-year war on Ukraine. Now, leaders of both organizations assure everyone that they're going to be working together very closely. Kaja Kallas is up here today and will be rolling out her own roadmap. It's called the Defense Roadmap tomorrow, where we'll learn more about the EU's initiatives. But it will take coordination because NATO would very much like to retain command and control of drone initiatives that stretch along the eastern flank. And of course, the European Union has the cash. So they will definitely be working together on this.
And what else have the defence ministers who are meeting there today, what else have they been talking about?
Well, Ukraine, of course, is a big focus here, and much of the afternoon is going to be devoted to what's called the Ukraine Defense Contact Group, where some 50 countries come together and talk about their contributions to Ukraine. Another item that's on both NATO and the Ukraine Defense Contact Group's agenda is what's called Pearl, and it's a prioritized Ukraine requirements list. And this is that deal that Mark Rutte made with the Americans, where the Europeans would pay for U.S. weapons to go to Ukraine. The U.S. is not buying these, but it does, of course, have the high-end capabilities that Ukraine needs. Now, another thing that's being talked about a lot is whether the U.S. will agree to give Ukraine Tomahawks. Ukrainian Defense Minister Shmyhal is here today, and I'm certain he'll be looking for an answer to that. Whether he'll get one or not, we don't know.
Also there today, of course, the Pentagon chief, Pete Hegseth. Can you give us a sense, Terry, of relations between the U.S. and NATO these days?
Well, you know, there used to be a lot of stress before these meetings. People worried about what Pete Hegseth would say, or Marco Rubio, of course, President Trump. But since that summit in The Hague in June, where President Trump said he finally understood that, you know, basically NATO was not a ripoff, that everybody was doing their best to protect their countries, and that he would do the same, things are a lot calmer on that stage. And today when Pete Hegseth arrived, he said that he would be looking for more firepower from NATO countries. Of course, now that everyone's agreed to spend 5% and to spend a lot of that on U.S. weapons, things seem to be a lot smoother. I don't think there will be any fireworks here at the meeting today between the U.S. and the other NATO allies.
DW's Terry Schultz. Terry, thank you for that update.
Fabrice Potier is the CEO of Rasmussen Global and former director of policy planning at NATO, and I asked him earlier how realistic the EU's and NATO's drone wall plans are.
Well, I think it's time for, indeed, the European allies to start looking at cheaper solutions to shoot down Russian drones than to use F-35 or F-16. So I think that's a welcome statement by the NATO Secretary General. But it will come down a lot to both European money, EU money, and using European technology. And the reality is that we've got a lot of interesting startups, scale-ups out there who have developed over the past few years, including by working with the Ukrainians, who have developed cheaper, smarter solutions to shoot down drones entering our airspace. So I think it's time to be innovative and to be bolder than using the old defense for it.
When we look at the big picture, the Institute for the Study of War says that Russia has entered phase 0 in Europe and is shaping conditions for a possible war. Germany's top spy has also warned that we have to be prepared for a further escalation, even an armed conflict. How do you assess what's going on?
I think we can't speculate too much of what the intentions are. I think you just have to look at the action and the pattern. And clearly there is some testing and probing going on the Russian side in looking at how we respond. And our response so far has been, I would say, lukewarm. We have indeed come together. We have invoked Article 4. We have had collective statements. But the means we have to defend ourselves are not really convincing if you are looking at it from a Russian point of view. So I think without making too much speculation about what might come next, I think you have to already look at what's happening now. And clearly there is a political attack campaign going on from Russia against Europe. And we have to respond in a clearer way to that.
Europe is stepping up its defense spending. You have Germany even debating reinstating the draft. The question, though, is the timing. Can they do all of this fast enough to meet the challenges at hand?
Well, that's a very important question. And can we maintain the spending at high level enough over, more than 5 years going into 10 years? I think that's the real question. And here Germany is obviously central. By the end of the decade, Germany will be spending something like 160 billion euro a year. This is considerable, and this is really key to European defense getting its act together. So I think we have to watch how Berlin can sustain this. In terms of timeline, yes, the faster the better. We have, I think, a window of 5 years to really get more European military mass deployable. But we also have fewer years to actually develop some military edge, some innovative solutions. So at least we don't get ourselves unsettled or put on the back foot by some cheap Russian drones.
What are you looking for out of today's meeting? What are you paying attention to?
Well, I think, we don't want more alliterations or more acronyms. We want more action and more money that can flow more directly into the European defense innovation base. I think that's really the key here, because if we have to go through some big programs, multinational cooperation, we are still looking at a 10-year scenario in the best case. Whilst you have to have solutions right now deployed in the most vulnerable points, starting with the eastern flank, but also some critical infrastructure. So what you want is to start seeing some real smart money flowing into our defense industrial and defense innovation base, so that these companies that already have the technology, the radars, the sensors, the techniques to shoot down or jam some drones, these companies can be scaling up fast enough to be able to defend our critical infrastructure.
Fabrice Potier, CEO of Rasmussen Global and former Director of Policy Planning at NATO. Thanks so much.
Thank you.